Good evening, Canada. Today is a very sad day for all of us here in Canada, Great Britain, and the rest of the Commonwealth nations. We lost our beloved Queen, Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, this afternoon. It's a very, very sad occasion for us, and we all are grieved, badly grieved and mourning. As we were recording our show today with our prominent guests, it was our duty as a Canadians to first condole Her Majesty's passing off this afternoon. And we would also like to congratulate the new King Charles, who has taken over after the passing away of the Queen. So it's not a good, happy occasion, but we will remember September 8, 2022. It's a dark day for the whole world and for the whole Commonwealth nations that we lost our sovereign head who ruled over us for 70 years, the longest reigning queen in the world. Am I right? She was the longest reigning queen
in the history.
In the history of the world. And we wish our new king all the best, and to show our solidarity with the people of United Kingdom. And at the same time, Canada is a part and parcel of Commonwealth nations and a strong supporter. We would be giving tributes to our king. God save the queen. Please rise. Good evening, Canada. We deeply mourn the sad demise of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II today. With a heavy heart, we are recording our show. We have got a very prominent family lawyer, as since a long time, our viewers of Voice of Canada were requesting to get more information about the divorce procedures here in Canada, how it happens, and what are its consequences. And there are all kinds of people over here who cannot afford to hire a very costly and a well-known lawyer too. So we would be asking Leanne today all the questions what our viewers have been asking. We have created a special format for her. So we warmly welcome prominent lawyer Leanne, who is a very well-known all over Toronto and the rest of Ontario and Canada for a family law business, what she is doing and practicing. Welcome to our show. Today we have got a very special co-host also, Snehali Patel, who is coming in our Voice of Canada as a co-host for the first time. And we hope with her hectic and busy schedule, she would be giving her appearance at least once a month.
I hope
That's
so.
what she has promised the program coordinator of her appearance, because she's a very, very lively and an experienced person, but very busy in her life. So we understand, and she stays pretty far off. So she drove all the way for over an hour and came to attend our show. So we are grateful to her as well.
Thank you.
So first and foremost, I would like to request our honored guest to introduce herself to our valued audience. Okay, what all you do, since how long you are practicing a family law, and then my part 2 question will follow. And then my co-host will be asking you her questions.
Thank you. I'm Leanne Townsend. I'm a family law lawyer, and I have just recently opened my own law firm called Townsend Family Law in the city of Toronto. I've been a lawyer since 1995. The first 16 years or so of my career, I was an assistant Crown attorney, and I specialized in domestic violence. I was the co-lead of the domestic violence team in the office that I worked in. So I have a lot of background working with victims of abuse and their children as well. I left the Crown's office in and around 2012, and I went into private practice. And from there, I've had experience as partner at a Bay Street law firm. And again, recently I've gone out on my own. I do all types of family law cases, anything involving divorce, spousal support, custody, property division, all of those sorts of things.
Even domestic violence?
And I have a specialty in domestic violence because of the background I have in the Crown's office. I've taken a lot of courses and training and work quite a great deal with victims of domestic violence.
So yeah, from your bio, we read, Leanne, that you have sufficient experience. You don't have any experience with media.
Oh, I do actually.
She has.
You
She
do
appeared
have
in
national news.
media.
Oh yes, you have
National
appeared in
news
national
and
news
media,
media
see?
as a guest. Plus, you have also done some print media, I hear.
I've done print
Magazines.
media,
Magazines, yeah.
and I've done interviews on TV, like on other
So,
TV
yeah.
shows.
So, could you please tell us what kind of shows and panel discussions you did earlier?
Yes, I've been interviewed on all of the major TV networks: CTV, CP24, CBC. As new breaking
Awesome.
stories happen in the area of divorce law or family law. I've been asked questions, live on TV about various topics there. I've been published in print media, Divorce Magazine. I've been a regular contributor to over the years. I have my own podcast as well called Divorcing Well, where each week I feature a different guest and we talk about issues that are helpful to people who are going through divorce. And I've written a book called Divorcing Well, and I'm just in the process of getting it published and out to readers to be in their hands so that it can help them.
That's amazing.
Leanne, inform our viewers, which is a very, very important question, and lots of people who would like to seek divorce as the life has become totally miserable for them and to continue with their marital status. So, but the question arises that in Canada, law is not easy or cheap. At the same time, to get justice in complicated cases takes a lot of time, lot of money, lot of efforts. So lots of women especially, they become victims of financial crisis and all. So would you be explaining to our viewers where such women should go? Who would help them to seek some justice in their life after reviewing the case?
Well, it is a very challenging process, and justice doesn't happen quickly, and it doesn't always happen. I mean, and that's something I tell clients that come in through the door. I always say we have a legal system. It's not necessarily a justice system. Justice isn't always served, and unfortunately, in the area of family law, a lot of people can't afford lawyers. The system is very broken that way. And I think the statistic is there's something over 50% of all litigants in the family court process are self-represented because they simply cannot afford a lawyer. So that's a huge number. And there are things available. Some people might qualify for legal aid, in which case, if they do, then they don't have to pay for their lawyer. It'll be covered by government funding, but legal aid has very strict qualifications too. So not everyone, there's lots of people out there who have a job, they're middle class people, but they just can't afford a lawyer, but they don't qualify for legal aid. And so they're the ones falling into a vacuum there. And there's some other options like limited scope retainers with lawyers, or what we call unbundled services. Not all lawyers do that. I accept them where a client they don't have to retain me fully on their case, but they can hire me on an as needed basis to give them legal advice and just pay my hourly rate. So it's a cheaper way for them to get access to a lawyer. But it's not probably as overall helpful as if you're able to just afford to retain a lawyer to handle your case.
But I would interrupt over here. But if they need for you to appear in a particular hearing, will you be doing that for that?
Not on an unbundled service. Usually in those types of cases, I'll help prepare the materials and I'll coach them on what to do at the hearing and give them strategic tips and things to focus on. But I do not appear on their behalf in court. I have to be retained in order to
full-time
appear in court.
retained.
Yes.
Correct.
Okay.
My last information about this divorcing in Canada and all that, they say the price averaged to about 40 to 50,000 K. So am I right? My information, or now it has increased with inflation and other factors involved?
I mean, it's hard to say what the average is. I mean, there's some people, their case is $2,500. They come and they just need a simple separation agreement. They're more or less on the same page. And, they might get in and out with a $2,500 bill. Other people who are in high conflict and they're going all the way to trial. If you go to trial, you're looking at well over $100,000, probably,
wow.
By the time from beginning to end, even $200,000. So it falls between those.
It's a very, very costly divorce.
It's very costly.
So many women would say, I would rather pull on with my life in misery than to take out $200,000.
Unfortunately.
And she can't afford herself because usually our immigrant women, they don't earn well and they have got very limited income in their hand for that at their disposal.
Yes.
At the same time, their husbands are playing like crooks and by dividing the assets, they are not fair. At the same time, if the woman has got kids, she comes into a very, very sad situation.
Yeah.
Yes, I mean those situations are terrible, and it's very difficult for a woman in that type of situation. I mean, if there are any marital assets, so for example, if there's a home that they live in, it doesn't necessarily matter who owns the home, like who title to the home is on, because if they're married, she's going to have a claim to,
50% share. Yeah.
possibly 50% of the home. So sometimes, like, what a lawyer can do is, if I have clients that come to me and they don't have money up front, I'll have them sign something called an authorization and direction, so that when I know that they're going to be getting money in the settlement from the sale of the home or from an equalization payment, and so they sign that, so then I'll just get paid out of the proceeds when that happens. So someone
Awesome.
can be in that
At least some relief to such ladies.
Yes, but some people don't even have that, right? If they don't own a home and there's nothing there, it's very hard.
Very hard.
Yeah, true.
At the same time, just also inform, this is the continuation of my question, to retain a lawyer, it's a very, very difficult task.
I think it's an intimidating task for a lot of people,
task,
you know, and I think people, I always say, I don't understand. I feel like I'm a friendly, nice person, but people are intimidated naturally by lawyers. I don't think all of us are friendly and nice, but which is probably why they're intimidated. But I think, to go from the process to pick up the phone and make an appointment to speak to a lawyer is a huge step for a lot of people.
Huge task.
And to get the right lawyer, that is also a very big step.
And that is so important, because a lot of people just take the first, they ask around, a family lawyer, and, Uncle Johnny's, best friend's cousin gives them a name, and that may not be the right lawyer
person
for them.
for that person
they should
in that
interview
case.
lawyers. Exactly.
So having said that, we have a question for you, that as an expert domestic violence lawyer, inform our viewers that on an average, how long does it take for a normal divorce to finalize? And if the settlement is very complex, how do you feel to deal with your clients and the other party, who is usually the spouse of a person, or who is seeking a divorce or a permanent or termination of the marital bond?
Those are great questions. I mean, in terms of the timeline, it's very hard to say, because, again, it's going to depend. If you're going to trial, it's going to take years. Like, I had a trial earlier this year, and that client had been with me from 2018, I believe. So he'd been in the system for 4 years.
4 years.
Yeah, before we finally had a trial. But again, if you're negotiating a resolution, then and you're not that far apart, it could happen much quicker. But generally, court appearances take time. The courts are very backlogged, and COVID didn't help that. So in certain jurisdictions like Newmarket, and I think Brampton is another one, their Peel, you get court dates like many months
because
out.
heavy cases are there.
Yes.
In these two places,
Yes, and so they're very backlogged. So, and sometimes, somebody doesn't have support, they don't have any money, and they have to wait, 4 months before they can get in front of a judge. The system is very broken in a lot of ways.
But both the cities have got different demographics, for my information, because being a community worker, I know Brampton demographics are very, very different. They have got over 49 to 50% immigrants.
Yes.
Immigrants. And the original Canadians are much lesser in number. They are in minority.
Yes.
Whereas in Newmarket, there is a major population is suffering from mental health, depressions, and other issues. I've even dealt with the Newmarket as far as the elections and all are concerned. And I've seen people are very different.
Yes, I mean, even though geographically these communities are not that far apart, they can't, even within Toronto, there's very different communities.
But still, it's a metropolitan.
Yes.
But these two cities, what we are particularly naming, has got very peculiar issues.
Yes,
you understood what I meant.
Yeah, no, I agree. And, Brampton, as you mentioned, the immigration aspect it's a huge
49%.
Yeah, and family law is an area too where I think we're going to probably be getting to this, but people come to Canada, and in their home country, marriage and family life and how you treat your spouse might be very different than it is here, and that's where we see a lot of issues pop up as well.
So usually in a divorce separation, the woman is the victim in most of the cases. What would you say about that?
I would say that it's not always the woman. I think traditionally, women more often are victims of domestic violence than men, but I think we're starting to become aware as a society, as the Johnny Depp trial showed, although not everyone may be on the side of Johnny Depp on that, but that men can be victims of domestic violence. And I think there's a lot of men out there that they, just like the women don't report it, the men don't report it. So it's hard to really fully gauge. But I do think, in my experience, in my practice, certainly I've found that significantly more women are the victims, and the financial piece of things hits the women much harder usually.
So according to your rich experience, inform our viewers why middle-aged couples split and
between
for
30,
separation.
35 and 45, there are lots of divorce cases. When is the peak time for women and for men to make a family
any valid
stable?
reason for
what are the valid reasons why they split?
I think there's a number of reasons. I mean, oftentimes, especially in modern times, there's now with like the internet and online dating and things like that, it's easier for people to cheat on each other. So cheating is one reason. Arguments about money is I would say that's probably the number one reason people divorce, is that they're having, disagreements. One has one's a spender, one's a saver. There's different money issues. And, people in the age group you just mentioned, often those are parents of, young families.
Young families,
and,
young kids.
Yeah, and I don't know if either of you have children. I do. And I know when you have children, it really does put a strain on
Big
your
strain.
relationship.
The dynamic totally changes with kids.
Yes, and so I think that could be a reason
and the woman
as well.
becomes really, really hard to cope up with the pressure of managing children, at the same time managing a troublesome hubby.
Yes, exactly. So I think that's a big thing. People don't, they become consumed with the children, so they don't put enough into the marriage, and they forget about each other as partners, and they, grow apart, and, then there's problems with the marriage. But interestingly, another group where I see a lot of divorces is what we call more like the grayer divorces, where people have been together 20, 25 years, and their children are now off to university, or they've moved out and have jobs, and then they're divorcing because they realize they've grown apart. It's like they stayed together for the kids, and then now they're realizing.
So the variety is over, you mean?
Yeah, exactly.
That's a little rude remark, but the thing is that happens, and they want some fresh attraction.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing. Again, it goes back to that whole online dating thing. Like it's so easy to meet. Years ago you couldn't meet people as easily.
And
nowadays,
a free society in Canada and a free country.
Yeah.
So they really feel they misuse their freedom.
Yes, unfortunately, that does happen.
Leanne, just inform our viewers that recently we have come through a long pandemic of 2 years of COVID-19.
Yes.
So during that COVID-19, I will be focusing on the region of Peel, especially. There were domestic violence cases in which over 24 housewives were killed by their own hubbies.
Yeah, that's awful.
So what were the major reasons? Everybody was stressed, everybody was scared, everybody was protecting themselves from the virus and to meet their house and meets, expenses and other things. But then immediately domestic violence and the woman is killed. So that was a very, very alarming situation in a literate community like Canada.
Yes,
and a civil community like Canada. So it increased, suddenly it shoot off. And all are concerned, what has gone wrong?
Well, and I think, you touched upon some of the things, and because of COVID and because of the need to isolate and stay home, you have a relationship where there's already abuse happening probably. And, the strain of being home so much together, it increased, and a lot of victims felt like they didn't have anywhere to go to either. It was harder to leave, and COVID did put a lot of financial strains on families. So again, you're arguing about money in a home where there's going to be violence. That's going to escalate when you're having more arguments about money. Children, it was a stressful time for everyone. Children were home you're trying to educate your children, do the homeschooling. You're working from home. You're shorter on, some people weren't able to work at all because they were off work because of shutdowns and everything. And so I think all of that stress on the family just created a situation where those prone to be violent with their spouse, it became even more so. And the victims felt stuck that they couldn't leave. It was harder because of the pandemic. And unfortunately, I guess it resulted in like this greater number of homicides, which is just horrible.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We'll be taking a short break and returning soon. Thank you. Welcome back to our weekly talk show, Voice of Canada. We have got a fantastic family lawyer, Leanne, who is a very well-known person in Toronto, in Ontario, and she's practicing law since last many, many years. And she was earlier working even for the government and for the Crown as well.
Yes.
So she has got a very rich experience how the Crown decides and how the Crown judges the people. So that's a very, very good thing that she can give advice to her clients. And now she has got an independent law office which deals in major family cases, including domestic violence, divorce, marriages, conflict, division of properties. And the major question which we are about to ask her is about the common law marriages. That is how it is affecting so many families, especially in the immigrant community, who don't understand our law of what is common law, wife.
Yeah,
And they usually violate. It's got a specific requirement a person has to meet to have a common law partner. Am I right?
Yes, that's correct.
So we will be asking you a little later. Prior to that, my co-host will be asking you her question.
Okay.
So my question to you is in continuation with our host question on the common law partners. Can a married man have a common law relationship? And is it illegal over here as it's a bigamy? Tell us, our law presides to the kind of situation.
So a married man or woman, for that matter, can have common law partners. They can only have here in Canada, they can only have one person that they're legally married to.
Mm-hmm.
But if for some reason they wanted to live with, with other women in addition to the wife that they're married to, it's not illegal, but the other women would not be recognized. They're not recognized as wives or spouses. So
but she enjoys the same facilities and marital bliss and everything.
But not, from a legal standpoint. Like, so if they were to split apart, a woman in that situation would have no standing to pursue things like spousal support and child support and equalization of net family property because she would not be recognized as a spouse. So, while a man could have multiple women living with him.
Multiple women?
Well, he could. I mean, it's not.
So you want mean to say like harem?
He could. It's not countries. As long as he's not he can't be married to them.
That's
all.
Very interesting. Very interesting.
Totally.
What I'm hearing is very, very interesting. And not only one common law partner, but multiple women also he can live and have relationship.
Legally.
So
and the law won't interfere.
The law won't interfere unless he's saying he's married to them, or unless if someone's trying to claim marital status, because you can only be married to one person. So if somebody has some sort of lifestyle where they're as they say have other women there, those women are putting themselves in a very vulnerable position because they won't have any legal standing to claim.
And even division of property and all the very good verdict came a few years ago.
Yes.
A very clear verdict was given. No party, either man or woman, can claim any property assets division in a legal law status.
That's correct. And there's very different rights that flow from living common law versus being married. And you mentioned the key one is the property rights. So if you live common law, you don't have property rights. If you're married, you do. A common law relationship, not with multiple people, but just say a man and a woman who are living common law. First off, they have to have lived together 3 years before one of them can even be entitled to something like spousal support. Or if they have children, that's different. If they have a child together, then they're entitled to some coverage that way. But they're not entitled to property. And if in situations where they want to make a property claim, it's more complicated. They have to pursue something called a constructive trust and unjust enrichment. And it's just a much more complicated and expensive way to have to get your rights to property. Whereas if you're married, they automatically flow. You don't have to prove that you have those rights.
That's amazing.
So I've got another question in continuation of this. If suppose a common law partner has children through that alliance, what will happen? What would be the legal status of those children?
In that situation, say it was the man with the multiple women, those children would still be the woman would still be entitled to child support for those children, because child support is the right of the child. So it doesn't matter what kind of crazy situation or relationship
the child was born into this world.
Yeah, the child is born into this world. The child has a right to child support, and the father, if would have to pay child support for all of his children. And if the woman worked, then that would be factored into the amount of child support. But he can't get out of paying child support even if the relationship might not be recognized the same as a marriage.
So
in such a case, what would happen if who will claim the children and the divisions and the name? If the child will be using the father's name or the mother's name?
Legally.
Well, I guess, that's when the child is born, it's going to depend on what is put on the birth certificate.
That remains intact.
What, sorry, pardon?
That the family name remains intact even after the divorce.
Again, well, you can change that, but it's like if a child is born and say they take their father's last name, and down the road the mother wants to change that, then there's a legal process that has to be followed. And if the father opposes it, which probably he would, I think it's going to be very hard for her to change the child's last name. But if when the child is born, say they're not married, they're common law, and the mother puts her last name as the child's last name on the birth certificate, then that's going to be the child's last name.
Last name.
Yes.
So inform our viewers that for different communities and nationalities, do different divorce law applies, or how do Canadian family lawyers handle such cases?
Because
do they approach like the community organizations or for such divorces, or is just Canadian divorce laws applies to all Canadians?
So Canadian divorce law applies to all Canadians. So that's the law of that we follow. It's the law of the land. It's the law we follow here in Canada. And so the court system is largely going to deal with applying Canadian law. But we do get situations. I have a client right now who's in this type of situation. She's Persian, and her husband is Persian, and they're getting divorced, but she wants also to have him consent to the religious divorce, because from where she's
known as talaq.
Yeah, because if she doesn't get that, she, from what I understand, like she can't go back to Iran. She has, there's a lot of, she's not allowed to remarry, even though according to Canadian law, she can remarry, but within the Persian law, she cannot unless he agrees to the religious divorce. And he's, of course, refusing to agree.
Oh, wow.
And so we're having to bring a motion.
It's harassment.
It is harassment. It's abusive. And he's doing that, I think, for that very purpose.
To make it more difficult.
And for such cases, what you have mentioned, is juries formed?
Sorry,
jury is formed? Jury members are formed?
No, we don't use, not for family law. We don't do jury.
Don't use jury.
Only criminal law.
Only criminal law.
And I guess not in, I think, corporate, commercial, and civil litigation, you can have juries, but not in family law.
Oh, okay.
And do the court appoints or consults their religious organizations and their head of their community? Do they refer?
The court doesn't, but I mean, lawyers can. Like, for example, with this Persian client that I'm mentioning, she sought out a lawyer in Montreal, actually, who specializes, in this issue. And so I've been consulting with him on this case, and he's been, very helpful resource, because until I had this client in this situation, I never had to deal with getting a religious divorce. Another type of religion where it comes up a lot is within the Jewish religion. They, there's something called a get.
Yes. Yeah, I was about to come on that.
Sometimes that's refused by the husband, and again, it creates problems for the wife. But the courts really, really frown on people who do that, because it really is a form of abuse.
So as per we say that in one of our visible communities with large volume here in Canada, with their complex religious laws, if a husband proclaims divorce, that means talaq.
4 times.
Is the divorce valid in the eyes of the Canadian law,
No.
or how
No.
do you? Okay,
See,
no, it is
it
not.
conflicts.
No.
It's so
Yeah.
conflicting.
No, if only it was that simple. I think a lot of people would save a lot of money in lawyer
Oh,
fees
yeah.
and stuff. But I mean, the problem is that when you divorce, it's not just simply a matter of saying,
Four times saying divorce.
we're divorced, let's go our merry ways. I mean, you have issues. There's kids. You have to decide what's the parenting schedule, who's making decisions for the kids, what's the child support, is there spousal support, how are we dividing the assets? So all of those type of things still flow, whether someone's declared themselves. Like,
So
even
will
with
law step into such cases?
Yes, the law, Canadian law applies in those types of situations. And I mean, if two people choose not to, ever sign a separation agreement and ever go to court and just work out their own thing and it's working for them, then, the legal system doesn't really have to get involved. But very few people who break up are able to come to some sort of amicable situation where it doesn't make sense to at least have it in writing in a separation agreement to enforce it.
As our Canadian law of divorce allows reconciliation, period is given to both husband and wife
Like a
after
separation period.
separation
where
and
they can come.
reconciliation period, that you have to pass that much amount of time and reconsider that you would like to go in and sign the divorce or not.
Yeah, so in order to get divorced in Canada, you have to live separate and apart for a year. And so part of the reason for that is that, it's kind of considered after a year, they're less likely to reconcile. But it's a common term that's put in separation agreements that if the parties reconcile for a period of 90 days or more, that the terms of the separation agreement are no longer valid. So if they reconciled and then 2 years later they split up again, they'd have to get a whole new separation agreement.
Wow,
Okay.
wow.
Yeah.
We'll be taking a short break and returning soon. Thank you. Come back to our weekly talk show, Voice of Canada.
So often we hear in our media that there is an increase in marriage of convenience. So where one partner who is a Canadian citizen gets huge financial benefits from other partner to enter into a fake marriage, like a contract marriage kind of a thing.
Especially from
for
South
convenience,
Asian countries.
yes.
Lots of cases happened. And even I had the honor of speaking to our Consul General from Chandigarh, India.
Yeah.
And we was here on a vacation and we said, okay, we would like to have some question and answers with you. Would you mind coming and telling us why the Chandigarh Post is rejecting so many visa applications and cases? He says, you won't believe we are rejecting 62% of applications coming to visa.
Just because of this.
What are the reasons?
Yeah.
I asked. So he says those are all fake marriages.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Canada's
do you
a great
guys-
country to live in, right? a
So
lot
do
of
you
people
guys
wanna come
actually
here.
work on such cases, and do you guys report such cases to Canadian police, or what is it? How do you handle such cases?
I personally, in my practice, I haven't had one of those cases.
Mhm.
I do think it's largely more of an immigration law issue per se than a family law issue, because if somebody's, having a fake marriage, then I think, if I came across that, I would want to report it to the immigration authorities, because I think that person should be deported and not allowed to stay here. And so that would be the first step ahead of whether there's any family law issues flowing from it. But, I have heard, just as you're saying, that it is on the rise, even though I personally haven't come across a case like that. But it really does seem to be like an
Mostly in
immigration
the
issue.
region of Peel.
Yeah.
Lots of cases happening.
Yeah.
Because
Especially
we have
South
got
Asian community.
majority
maybe,
South
yeah.
Asian communities. And there is another visible minority community who is legally allowed to marry 4 times, according to the rituals and the religious rites. But according to that religion, a person has to take the consent of his first wife before getting into wedlock.
Yes.
But he usually doesn't do. He just goes quietly to his country of origin, gets married, and brings that new wife into Canada and claims that that is his second wife, whereas that is not the actual case.
Legally here.
The first wife is staying in the same old house. He's enjoying all the bliss from her. At the same time, he's enjoying from the second new wife also. So, which is a very, very complex and illegal things are happening.
Yes, no, and I mean, certainly something like that, it should be reported to the police and immigration. If if I were to see something like that, or if anyone who's watching the show today is aware of a situation like that, that's what they should do, because it is illegal, and it's putting these women really in a bad position as well, because
That's true. It's not fair to them too.
No, exactly.
Go ahead.
Yes. So, Leanne, due to the paucity of time, we would conclude our evening interview with you in our weekly talk show of Voice of Canada. Would you like to give some concluding remark, especially to our women folks here?
Yes, definitely. I would like to say, to your viewers, that when you're going through divorce and separation, it's really, really tough. And, research shows that next to death of a spouse, divorce is life's second most stressful event. So if you're out there and you're going through this and you're feeling overwhelmed and, like your life is terrible right now, that's common how people feel when they're going through this. But what I always say to my clients is that yes, as you go through the process, it's going to get worse, but then it gets better, and it gets so much better. And if you're in a bad relationship, and particularly an abusive relationship, yes, leaving is hard. It's very, very hard, but it's not going to get better unless you do leave. And the only way to get a better life is to leave and seek out the resources and supports that are out there for you. And if you're willing to take that, to have the courage to take that step, your life will get better.
Leanne, I've got another question. Will you throw some light on the laws of Jews' marriage?
Of Jewish
Because
marriages?
Jewish marriage also has got lots of complications and lots of issues happen because they have their religious thinking and the ways. At the same time, the Canadian law also applies to them.
Yes.
So will you throw some light on it? Because our viewers would like to know about the Jewish marriage laws.
Yes. So, again, Canadian law applies in terms of the divorce and the property rights and decision-making with respect to children and parenting schedules and all of those sorts of things. But again, you get into this situation where in order to be divorced for religious purposes, there's something called the Jewish get that the woman has to have. And there's a lot of the synagogues and within the Jewish community, they actually have, resources and people who work to help, women in that situation get the Jewish get so that they can be, officially divorced. So, if someone out there is in the Jewish community, I would highly recommend that they, speak with someone at their synagogue, their rabbi, or, other members of the community who can connect them with the right people to help them get that, because it's like a separate thing from the actual, Canadian legal system, but it's still something that, they need to have or to go through in order to be properly divorced within their community.
So do they issue a separate certificate from the community office of the divorce?
To be honest, I don't know if it's a certificate or what form
or
it
legal
takes, but it's a legal
statement,
some sort of legal
document.
Yeah.
And then the Canadian law accepts that?
Well, the Canadian law is just separate altogether. Like we don't depend. Like we can declare them divorced by the Canadian law, regardless of whether they have the Jewish get or not. But it's just for their own purposes within their community and their religion to be accepted as divorced and be allowed to remarry. They need to get that. So. Probably in order to get the get, they need to have the Canadian divorce first.
So they apply again. They apply again and go for a Canadian law divorce proceedings also.
Yes. That would be the first part, and then the religious part would be the second part.
My
So
God.
does the Canadian divorce law take into consideration the country where the couple was married, or is it if they're Canadians, you get a Canadian divorce and that's that divorce is universal? So is Canadian divorce affiliated or valid in other countries of the world?
Yeah, it's accepted in other countries of the world. If you're living here and you get divorced here and you've got a court order or a separation agreement or whatever, then that's valid. Having it enforced in another country would be a whole different issue. Even having them enforced here in Canada sometimes can be a challenge if somebody's not complying. That's one of the problems we have that, we touched upon briefly before we commenced the show, and we were talking a little bit about people not paying support and whatnot and trying to enforce that. So certainly if there's challenges with enforcing something within Canada, there would be even bigger challenges enforcing it outside of Canada. But, legally it should be recognized.
Leanne, there are few cases we have heard here in Canada that the man goes to some Caribbean countries and they get divorced in about 24 to 48 hours. And after that, on the third day, the man get remarried according to their marriage or whatever, dissolution or separation. So do Canada approves that?
Not if it hasn't, if they haven't lived separate and apart for a year, and they haven't, say there was a man and a woman and they were married 10 years and they had kids, and he left, went to the Caribbean, got a divorce and remarried. If he hadn't used the Canadian legal system to divorce his wife here, and they hadn't settled their family law issues, Canada wouldn't recognize that is a valid marriage.
So will Canada allow that Caribbean lady to come with him as his marriage partner because he is legally married as per Caribbean law?
Again, that's more of an immigration issue, and I'm not.
I'm asking you.
I know as much about.
They're very close to each other. The divorce, immigration. I think they all are like very
intertwined there.
Would you like to give your final remarks, comments, and advice to our especially women who are seeking divorce, how to go about it, how to seek justice for themselves, and how to remain safe?
Yes, and safety is very important. And so, if any women out there watching this show are in danger or their safety is in danger, call the police, leave, go to a shelter. All of that is so important. And I guess the one thing I really want to get across to listeners is that don't be intimidated by lawyers. If you're going through a divorce or separation, whether you're common law or married, you need legal advice. If you don't get legal advice, it's going to be to your detriment. And there's ways of accessing that legal advice, whether it's, some lawyers offer free consultations. As I mentioned, there is legal aid. Some lawyers offer unbundled services where you can pay as you go for certain things. But at least have an initial consultation so that you know what your rights and your entitlements are and you understand, because a lot of abusive type of personalities will sit down with the victim of their abuse and say, oh, we don't need to get lawyers involved. They're just going to cost money. We don't want to spend money on that. And they're saying that because they're protecting themselves by not wanting to get lawyers involved, because they don't want a lawyer to come in and advocate for their spouse and get their spouse what their spouse is entitled to. So as I say, it's really, even if you have to pay for 1 hour of a lawyer's time, I think it's really, it's worth it. And I mean, I know I'm a lawyer, so it's self-serving, but I really, it is
to get
really,
a proper
really
advice,
yes,
legal
advice.
And accurate advice. I think that's one thing.
Law is such a thing, a common man won't be knowing all the tricks of the law.
No, and do it right away. Don't sit on it, because sometimes if you sit on things and something becomes the status quo, then it's going to be harder down the road to change that. Whereas if you got advice at the beginning and you knew you shouldn't be agreeing to something or allowing something to continue, you can stop it or change it and make things, get a better result down the road.
So with that note, we'll be thanking our honored guest, Leanne, a new power pack family law lawyer who was here, who took out time. She came all the way from downtown Toronto. So we are really, really grateful she came up to Mississauga to record her interview. And we hope that our interview with Leanne will be truly helpful to our viewers around, not only our viewers, but around the world, because we have got a huge listeners and people who watch on IPTV boxes as well. Wow. And we get lots of queries and information from them. Okay, you try to do on this subject, that subject, invite this person, that person, so it will be very interesting because our program is widely watched. Our is a 24-hour cable satellite TV channel, and we wish you all the best. And in future too, if we need any advice on family laws, domestic abuse, relating we would definitely consult you. We will invite you even when we have the panel discussions
I'd like
about the
that.
family laws and all,
Thank you
where
very
we can
much.
call some for panel discussions, some housewives and some all ladies who can express their views. They can even ask questions to you, and that will be really helpful.
Yes, I'd love to do that. And thank you so much for inviting me to be a guest on the show today. And I'm happy to help however I can.
Definitely.
Thank you.
So on behalf of Voice of Canada, your main host Asphandiar Wadiwalla and my co-host Snehali Patel, I thank everyone and our honored guests. I hope to see you next week with a brand new show and the new guests. Take care. Goodbye. God bless Canada. Adios.